Welcome to this week's edition of Just Sports, along with Tommy Dahlk and Kyle McCaskey. What do you think? Yeah, golf clap here. There we go. Kyle McCaskey, our new sports writer by way of KFDI Radio in Wichita. Kyle, before we get started here, you kind of, as you elegantly wrote in your column today, told us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your not necessarily where you've been and all that, but what do you like about covering high school sports?
Well, the thing about high school is there's always the emotion of all of the athletes, and that's kind of my favorite part. The coaches always have the good quotes, but the athletes are passionate, and there's never a dull moment with athletes right after a game.
You brought up in your column today the Hutch Derby rivalry and the two-point conversion victory that Hutchinson had at Derby 2 seasons ago. You talk about emotion. Was that probably the most emotional from a sadness or anger or disappointment standpoint you've covered?
I think there was a little bit of a disbelief that anyone would go for the two-point conversion in that scenario, and that kind of ruffled some feathers. But Randy Dreiling is an interesting coach, and he got a win, and that's all that counts, and he found a way. So.
I think it's the first time I've ever heard someone use interesting to describe Randy Dreiling. But are you disappointed that you're not going to get a chance to deal with him?
Oh, I had my time with Randy Dreiling, and I'm not disappointed, but he's a good coach, and he did some quite respectable things here at Hutchinson that no one ever thought he could. So.
That's right. Yeah, he's definitely one of a kind in many ways. So, but let's get on to some high school basketball here. We'll start with the Tournament of Champions out at Dodge City, and Tommy was out there for 2 games last week. We didn't cover the 3rd game, but I was able to watch some of it online. Hutchinson Salthawks, Tommy, I think it's fair to say, had probably out of the 8 teams there, the 8th best in terms of talent. Yet they go 2-1 and finish 4th. And actually they were in the game against undefeated Hayes for a while.
Yeah.
And just tell me, how are they doing this right now? I mean, 5-7 is not a great record, I know, but this could be a dangerous team come March. And when you're beating teams like Wichita Heights and Leavenworth, how are they doing this right now?
Coach Henry was talking about that they're just more efficient on offense. That was like the key thing. They're just being efficient, making shots. And keeping it low scoring.
Which is something they're going to have to do. I'm not even sure they can play a game in the 50s and win it these days. I mean, both games that they won over in Dodge City were in the 40s.
Or our boy Kalen Hills, just dribbling it. He might just score 50 by himself if they get him enough touches.
Well, the game against Wichita Heights, I mean, that was a marquee win. Wichita Heights, I believe, is in 2nd place in the Wichita City League. And when that game ended and Hutchinson won on a last second or a late shot from, I believe, Ryan Steckline, I mean, were you surprised after watching that game that, how did Hutchinson beat these guys?
Not really, just because Wichita Heights didn't look that good. Not trying to say that and take anything away from Hutchinson, but Heights looked terrible. They missed so many layups, they couldn't make a free throw. Like, I was surprised Hutch wasn't blowing them out, to be honest.
Well, they Heights, I think you might have said this to me yesterday, almost had they lost their first round game and almost kind of had a play it out kind of mentality.
It's like they were tanking for Wiggins or something, Still, my favorite moment was when they missed like 4 straight layups in the second half, and then one of them didn't use the backboard and tried to do, the finger roll, and then this guy behind just used the bleeping backboard.
Was it a fan or a coach?
It was a fan. It was just but the place was completely silent. You could just hear it.
Well, it kind of reminds me of a local basketball coach, Marion Heim. That's one of his favorite lines. Everyone who's ever seen Marion coach, it's use the backboard. So it could have been him out there for all I know. So, but then they come around the next day and beat a good Leavenworth team. Like I said, we didn't cover that game, but I was able to watch it online. And I remember in the 3rd quarter, I think Hutchinson had something like 16 points late in the 3rd quarter. I'm thinking, well, this game's over. They're down 25-15 at one point. They can't score. And all of a sudden they come back and it's like a 2-point game. And then Kalen Hills hits that last second shot that hit every part of the rim. And, I was kind of compiling the sub-state standings to see where they kind of sit right now. And right now, I think it's realistic to think that Hutchinson could finish anywhere from 2nd to 7th. But regardless, it's going to be a tough sub-state to get out of because there's a lot of good teams plus Mays, and even though your buddy doesn't play for Mays. But this team, I mean, it's not going to be a fun team for someone to beat in March, is it?
They've pretty much been in every game, even when they've lost. I don't recall a blowout.
And like you said, even though Hayes, I think, beat them by 20-some points, it was an 8-point game, I think, early in the 4th quarter, wasn't it?
It was 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, they were pretty much then just went on a little run towards the end, and it looked a lot. Score was pretty deceiving.
Right. Well, I had a pretty good game myself on Friday. I took in the Andale girls in Buhler. Andale's gotten a lot better, and they won 55-52. Taryn Torgerson, Buhler's one of their forwards, hit a shot at the buzzer, hit the back of the rim, went straight up in the air, and I'm just thinking that's going to go in. Hit the front of the rim and bounced off. So, but it was a good game. I remember seeing some of the Buhler girls come out of the locker room. Alex Keller was probably the most disappointed. She had a great game against Andale, kind of carried him when they neutralized Jessica Steffen. But the thing that kind of stood out to me about that game was Andale, or not Andale, but Buhler's girls were just very, very disappointed. I mean, some of them were crying when they left the locker room. And Coach Brennan Torgerson was saying what a good thing that was, because he says, they're starting to understand, he's starting to understand them. He's saying that they have the passion to win, and that's a good thing to see this team. It was only their second loss of the season, and they're going to have a very tough tournament coming up this week at Haven. All three of us are actually going to be down there, so hopefully the hospitality room's pretty good, because that's what these mid-season tournaments are all about. It's not about the basketball, it's about the food that they serve in there.
Burton's was good, though.
What'd you have?
Oh, they had little miniature cocktail weenies. They had the pulled pork. I was just hanging out there for about 2 hours in between game, just nonstop.
I told you. I'm telling you, try the hospitality room. So, Kyle, have you seen Buhler at all this year? I know that you've been stringing with Ketchit, Kansas, and I know that being from Mulvane, I know you're familiar with the AVCTL divisions 3 and 4. So, have you seen Buhler play this year?
Haven't seen Buhler. I've probably seen all of their competition, though, on the ABCTL D3, D4. And those are some pretty good leagues right now. The Mulvane girls are pretty good. Rose Hill's kind of turned it on here lately, which is kind of interesting. They went from 0-5, 0-6 to a competitive team all of a sudden. They had a girl score 30 points the other night, so they're putting some things together. The 4A right now is a pretty interesting scenario. There's a lot of interesting teams. I don't think there's a lot of high-end guys, but there's definitely some challenges ahead.
That's a good
their schedule.
Yeah, that's a good point about 4A, and that can go for both divisions, Division 1 and Division 2. I think in McPherson, a very good McPherson team, but they lost to 30-28 to Hutchinson. So it's going to be a dogfight, I think, in 4A girls basketball. That's a very good point. And tonight you're going to be taking in your first game for the Hutch News. You're going to be taking in the Goddard boys against Hutchinson. So I'm sure you'll see a last-second shot or something. So be kind of like the NBA, just cover the last minute of the game, and you'll get everything you need from there.
Yeah. Game of runs.
Like you mentioned earlier with Hutchinson boys, I mean, they don't have a strength of schedule component in 6A, but if they did, that Wichita Heights win is really pretty. They have Ely Bell and Samaj Hervey down at Wichita Heights, and that's a team that potentially can be in the state title game in 5A. So it's hard to measure where Hutchinson is right now, but there's potential there for something big.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at their schedule down the road, I don't think at 5-7 right now, I'm not sure a 500 record's out of the question for them. Yep. Speaking of a 500 record, the Hutchinson girls are over 500 right now, and you went out there and talked to them yesterday for a story that will run later in this week. They got a tough tournament coming up this week at Lawrence Free State High School. But it's another team that kind of like the boys, gosh, they're 5-7, and you're trying to figure out how they've won some of these games. The girls are over 500 right now, and they were down double digits to Goddard last week, and they came back and won by double digits. So it's a very resilient team. Is that something they talked about yesterday, was their resiliency?
Yeah, that's what Stiggins was talking about, just how he said that Goddard, earlier in the season when they're, trailed a maze or something, that they kind of had that look like, oh, we might lose. Now he never got a sense of doubt when they were down against Goddard. But they actually believe, winning a few games, they just kind of built the confidence and just going from there. But I think the funny thing about Stiggins is where he's acted like this season isn't nothing to celebrate about. Like, people are surprised they're 6-4. He's just like, oh, we've got to be consistent. We got to be.
Well, and there is something to be said about that because, frankly, the top two teams in the state are in their sub-state, Wichita South and May. So it's going to be a chore to get to the state tournament for Hutchinson. But what they've accomplished. I was at that Goddard game, and they couldn't buy a basket. They couldn't score. They were missing shots they couldn't even get the ball inside. I think their first 2-point basket, or first 2-pointer near the basket, came with about 3 minutes left in the third quarter. They were just shooting up a lot of threes, and they couldn't make any mid-range shots. And all of a sudden, one 3-pointer goes in, and then they get a steal in the layup, and all of a sudden, an 11-point game is down to 6. And of course, they had the big play where Emily Wessel dove out of bounds, or she didn't really dive, but she flew out of bounds, swatted the ball back over her head, and while 9 players on the court were watching the ball, she's the one going after it. Goes right to McKenna Krause, and she lays it in, and all of a sudden Hutchinson's got the lead, and you're thinking they're going to win this game now. So they're definitely a resilient bunch, and that's something that I think it's going to carry them well, even in a tough tournament this week at Lawrence Free State.
And that Wessel's like, what, 5'4", 5'5", and she's good in the post, too, playing defense. Like, they're small.
Yeah, they are small, except for McKenna Krause, and, that's something they do. They just battle. They got some quick guards. Jenna Higgins is quick. Jordan Downing's quick. Shayla DeGarmo's a smart little player out there in the front court. So they've got some good athletes and some girls who know how to play defense. And kind of like the boys, I don't think they can win a game in the 50s. They got to keep the game in the 40s and the 30s to have a chance to win.
30-28 win over
McPherson. That was a barn burner, I'm sure.
Well, if you look at the Hutch girls' resume anyway, I think they've only got one loss to a 6A team, and that's Mays. That's a pretty darn good team to lose to. Other than that, it's Salina Central and Newton. I'm thinking Eisenhower, if I'm right off the top of my head.
They lost to Eisenhower to start the season.
I mean, those are all competitive teams. Salina Central has kids going to K-State, so there's no shortage of talent in the losses that they've taken. So.
Well, and I was talking to Coach Stiggins after that game, and the thing, and it's interesting you said that he's not really ready to celebrate. They've already won as many games this year as they did all of last year, and one thing that I know that he's not exactly happy about is playing Mays in this tournament, because they still got to play Mays a third time in the regular season. I know that scheduling these midseason tournaments isn't the easiest thing in the world to do, but why do you have Hutchinson and Mays travel 3 hours to Lawrence to play each other when they already played? I mean, it's not like it's the last game where you can't help. I mean, you did this in advance. You intentionally scheduled Hutchinson to play Mays. Why?
Probably all about the money.
Oh yeah, big gates.
The big bucks of
They're
high school basketball.
Get a big gate at there, I'm sure.
I know.
Well, like I said, we're going to be kind of scattered all over the place this week. We got the Haven tournament later this week, which includes Nickerson, Beeler, and Haven. So that should be one of the better tournaments, high school girls tournaments around here, and we'll have all the coverage from there a little later in the week.
We do just sports there, like on location, like they're doing on the Super Bowl and all those shows.
I tell you what, the folks in Haven love us, so I'm sure they'll have a good hospitality room waiting for us. They take care of us down at Haven.
The AD says just put drinks on his tab. It's like, oh, get yourself a pop on my tab.
Oh, that kind of
just
drink?
Tell the principal.
I'm sorry, I should say that. Mike sells good.
Free keg cup, house cup at the Haven gym.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have this week for Just Sports, and enjoy the consecutive high school tournament week, and we'll see everyone out here again next year.